They always say legends are just old fears dressed up in stories. That people, faced with silence and shadow, will make monsters out of fog and wind. I believed that too, until the legend found me. My name is Thomas Everett. 5 years ago, I took a job that changed everything I believed about reality. It started simply enough. I was 28, a little burned out from city life, and desperate for a change. That's when I saw the listing, caretaker wanted for remote estate, and something about it pulled at me. A retreat, solitude, a chance to breathe again. The estate was called Stone Marrow Hall, nestled at the edge of a place I'd never heard of. Elmsbrook, a village hidden deep in the northern hills, where the trees grow too thick and the sky always seems an hour away. The train ride up took half a day. The walk to the estate took an hour more, along a narrow road coiled between thick woods and steep gullies. They call that stretch the Devil's Loop. No one tells you the name at first. They just refer to it vaguely. That hill road. The old path. Mind the curves. But it didn't take long for me to hear the real name whispered in the corners of Elmsbrook's only inn. The innkeeper, a man with a face like old bark, handed me my room key on that first night and muttered, "Don't walk the loop after dark. Just don't." I smiled, thought he was joking. He didn't smile back. I should have listened. Stone Marrow Hall was a breath of the past. Stone walls thick enough to muffle thought, windows tall and narrow like watchful eyes. The place had been abandoned for years before the trust hired me to clean it up, catalog what remained, and prepare it for sale. It wasn't haunted. At least, not in the way I understood hauntings. No rattling chains, no cold spots. Just a feeling, a heaviness, like the air didn't want you there. The first few days were fine. I swept, opened windows, aired out ancient linens. I even convinced myself that the creaks and groans were just age settling into wood and stone. But the nights were different. Always quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence where you start hearing things you're not sure are real. It was on the 4th night that I heard the hoofbeats. I was reading in the library, a glass of wine beside me, the fireplace glowing low. Outside, a storm had started. Light rain and a whisper of wind through the chimney. Nothing unusual, until it wasn't just wind anymore. Clop, clop, clop. Slow, deliberate. Not like a gallop or a runaway horse. No, this was calm, measured, like something, or someone, was patrolling. I stood, heart tapping against my ribs, and crossed to the window. The trees swayed in the dark. The rain streaked the glass. But I saw no rider, no horse. Just that sound. Clop, clop, clop. Then, clear as breath on my neck, I heard a voice. "Leave this place. Before he rides." I don't remember falling, but I found myself sitting on the rug minutes later, the wine glass shattered, my hands shaking. The fire was out. The room was cold. I slept with the lights on that night. Chapti oui. The next morning, I found hoofprints in the mud at the edge of the loop. Not many, just 3. They stopped inches from the manor steps. No human prints. No signs of a rider. Just those 3 deep, symmetrical marks in the soil, as if something had come and stood waiting. I tried to explain it away. Maybe a local had ridden through. Maybe a stray horse. Maybe my imagination was filling in blanks it shouldn't. But doubt gnawed at me all the same. Things only got worse from there. The clocks started to stop at 3:03 a.m. Every night. Books fell from shelves. Doors that I locked before bed stood wide open in the morning. One morning I found a small pile of stones on my pillow, arranged in a tight circle, as if someone or something had performed a ritual while I slept. Still, I stayed. I told myself I was being dramatic. That isolation was playing tricks. I turned to logic, to research. I spent a full day in the manor's attic, digging through old ledgers and papers. That's where I found it. A leather-bound journal from 1887. its pages yellowed and flaking. It belonged to a man named Harold Dunning, a former caretaker just like me. One entry stood out. Saw him again last night. Tall, cloaked. The horse had no eyes. It just stared and breathed like it knew. The rider pointed at the house. Always points. Never speaks. But I hear him anyway. I cannot leave. The loop won't let me. There were more entries. Shorter. Increasingly panicked. The last one was barely legible. He is real, and now he rides for me. I slammed the book shut and left the attic, heart hammering. That night, I dreamed of black hooves, of trees bending in unnatural wind, of eyes like coals burning through fog. And in the dream, he said my name. The next morning, I found a letter slipped under the front door. There was no name, no return address, just a folded scrap of paper that read, "The Dark Rider comes for those who listen, and you've listened too long." I packed my bags. I told myself I'd leave first thing in the morning, but it was already too late. Chapter. That night, my final night at Stone Marrow, I heard the hoofbeats again. This time, they didn't stop outside. They entered. Wood creaked. Floorboards moaned. The sound of steps echoed through the hall, slow and patient. Clop, clop, clop. I pressed myself into the corner of the library, holding a fire poker in one hand and Harold's journal in the other. The air grew thick. The lights dimmed. And then he appeared at the end of the hall, cloaked in black, face hidden in shadow, tall, too tall. The horse beside him snorted steam, though the room was ice cold. The rider didn't speak. He just pointed at me, and my vision went black. I woke up at dawn, outside, lying in the dew-covered grass. My bags were beside me. The house stood silent. Nothing moved. No footprints. No hoofprints. No sign of anyone at all. I left without looking back. I walked the entire way to the train station. I never returned to Elmsbrook. Never spoke of it. Until now. But here's the truth. Once you hear the hoofbeats, you never stop hearing them. They follow. They wait. And one day, the rider comes again. Not to warn, but to claim. I didn't think he'd follow me. When I boarded the train out of Elmsbrook, I thought it was over. I remember gripping the cold seat, watching the village disappear behind a curtain of trees, telling myself over and over, "You're safe now. He's part of that place. He can't leave it." But that's the thing about old legends. They don't obey borders. They don't fade when you walk away, especially not when they've seen you. I tried to return to normal. New apartment, new city. I took a job at a small library near my university. I kept my head down. I avoided late nights and long shadows. For a while, it worked. I told myself I was better, that the fear I felt back at Stone Marrow was just trauma, something the brain invented in isolation. But the loop remembered me, and soon, so did he. It started again 3 weeks later. At first, it was small things. My books fell off the shelf in the middle of the night. A photo frame cracked without reason. The sound of creaking floorboards, even though I lived alone on the top floor. I ignored it. Until I couldn't. One night, I came home from work to find the lights off. I was sure I'd left them on. I flicked the switch. Nothing. I checked the fuse box. All normal. Then I stepped into the hallway. Clop, clop, clop. Not loud. Faint. Like distant footsteps in the floorboards above me. Except there were no floors above me. I froze. The sound stopped. And then, slowly, came the whisper. Ragged. Soft. Unmistakable. "You left." But he never did. I bolted out the door and didn't stop running until I reached the river 3 blocks away. I stood there in the cold for almost an hour, panting, trying to tell myself I was imagining things. The next morning, I found a circle of small stones on my kitchen table, just like the one I'd found on my pillow back at Stone Marrow Hall. The rider was with me again. I tried everything. I burned sage. I talked to a local priest. I even spoke to a therapist, who smiled gently and said, "Sometimes trauma leaves echoes, and the mind turns those echoes into hauntings. But echoes don't leave scorch marks on your door. They don't rearrange your furniture while you sleep. They don't whisper your name at 3:03 every morning." No, this wasn't trauma. This was a warning, and the rider was getting closer. I went back to research. I found archived records of Elmsbrook at a university library. The town dated back to the 1300s, first recorded as Eldensbrook, built near a monastery that mysteriously burned down in 1421. No cause ever confirmed. But in the years that followed, dozens of reports described the Black Rider, the Shadow Horseman, the Watcher on the Road. Every few decades, someone else saw him, and they all said the same thing. He appears after dusk. He rides the Devil's Loop. He points. He warns. And then, he follows. There were entries in handwritten town journals. One read, "Father Ulrich claims the rider is a spirit of vengeance, bound to the loop by sacrifice. He rides to punish those who disturb the hush, but no one remembers what was sacrificed, or by whom." Another read, "Mary Fale claimed she saw him in her dream, pointing toward her house. She vanished 2 nights later. Only the hoofprints remained." I sat in the dim light of that archive room, the pages spread before me, my hands cold and trembling. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone. But I was marked. I stopped sleeping. I began seeing the rider in reflections, in train windows, in dark puddles on the street, in shop glass at night, always distant, always still. Until one night, he moved. I was walking home from work, crossing an old bridge, when I felt it, the change in the air, that same pressure I'd felt back in the library at Stone Marrow. The hairs on my arms rose, and then I saw him, on the far end of the bridge, standing still, tall, cloaked, unmoving. His horse stared at me, steam rising from its nostrils like breath in the cold. I turned and ran. I didn't look back, but I knew he hadn't vanished this time. He'd followed me into the real world. That night, I finally broke. I called Barrow, the old innkeeper in Elmsbrook. I had to know the truth, had to ask what no one told me the first time. To my surprise, he picked up. His voice was tired, older than I remembered. When I asked about the rider, there was silence, then a sigh. "You should have never taken that job, boy." "Who is he?" I demanded. "Why does he follow people?" Barrow's voice dropped to a whisper. "He remembers those who remember him. That road. It was cursed long before the hall was built. The monastery stood there once. They say something happened, something dark. A pact, blood for silence. And the rider was born of that silence." "Why does he follow me?" I asked. "Because you saw him, because you heard him, and because you didn't leave fast enough." I tried to ask more, but Barrow hung up. I haven't been able to reach him since. I began to prepare. I moved apartments. I changed cities. I stopped using my real name. But it didn't matter. No matter where I went, I heard him. Hoofbeats in the night, doors creaking open. And always, always, the whisper. He remembers. Last week, I woke up with dirt on my floor. I live on the 5th story. There were hoofprints, and a ring of ash around my bed. The loop never ended. It just stretched. And now, no place is far enough. There's one last thing. Last night, I heard his voice not as a whisper, but as a warning. He said, "It is your turn to ride." And when I looked in the mirror, my eyes glowed like coal. I no longer know what day it is. Time blurs when sleep becomes dangerous. I haven't truly rested in weeks. I catnap in chairs with every light on, jump awake at the softest creak, and keep a fire poker beside me like it'll make a difference. But nothing protects me now. He's not just following anymore. He's closing in. It began with the mirror. That night, when I saw those eyes, red, flickering, unreal, I screamed. Not because they were glowing, but because, for 1 second, I wasn't sure they didn't belong to me. My face stared back, but something else was behind it. Something watching me from inside my own reflection. I smashed the mirror. The glass didn't shatter normally. It cracked into a perfect spiral. At the center, a tiny hoof-shaped print. I tried to leave again. I packed a bag and drove west. Didn't tell anyone. Didn't stop. I kept the windows down, praying the night air would drown out the voice I could already feel forming in my bones. But after 7 hours of driving, I reached a crossroads. No signage, no lights, just a single path winding up a hill through the trees. A shape I recognized instantly. The Devil's Loop. It wasn't possible. I'd left that place hundreds of miles behind. But there it was, in front of me again. Mist curling like fingers through the leaves, the trees leaning forward as if to whisper, "Welcome back." I turned the car around. The road behind me? Gone. Replaced with forest. Endless and dark. I was back in Elmsbrook. Or rather, it had come to me. That was when I saw him again, standing just beyond the tree line, not moving, not blinking, just pointing, right at me. I didn't wait. I drove forward, full speed, praying for an exit. Instead, the road ended at a cabin I'd never seen before. The place was old, sagging, its roof barely hanging on. A single oil lamp burned inside, though there was no visible electricity. Against my better judgment, I stepped out of the car and approached. I didn't knock. The door creaked open on its own. Inside sat a woman. She must have been 100 years old, skin like parchment, eyes pale and glassy. But she looked at me as if she'd known I was coming. "Sit," she rasped. "You don't have much time." I obeyed. She poured a thick black tea that smelled of ash and earth, then began to speak. "You've heard the hooves," she said. "You've been marked." I nodded. "You don't run from the rider," she continued. "You ride with him." I didn't understand. She leaned closer. "The rider chooses his successor. It's how he's lived so long. Not a ghost, not a man. A memory in motion. Every few decades, someone sees too much, listens too long. Then the curse turns." My mouth went dry. "You're saying I'm becoming him?" She didn't answer. Instead, she stood and hobbled to a shelf, pulling down a wooden box. Inside was a horse's bridle, charred black, still warm to the touch. "Wear it," she said, "or he'll take more than your soul." I didn't. I left. But something in me changed the moment I touched that box. Something shifted. Now, wherever I walk, my steps echo. I can smell ash in the wind. Dogs bark when I pass. Lamps flicker when I enter. And always, at night, I hear the hooves. Not behind me anymore. Beneath me. Like they're no longer chasing. Like they're part of me. The dreams have worsened. In them I wear the cloak. I hold the reins. I see the terrified faces of strangers through swirling mist, and I point, not because I want to, but because I must. Every night, I point. Every morning, I wake with soot under my fingernails and dirt in my bed. Last week, I blacked out for 12 hours. When I came to, I was on the side of a country road. No idea how I got there. A newspaper nearby reported a local man missing. Vanished after claiming he'd seen a rider in the fog. I never told anyone. But I knew the truth. I had ridden. There's no one I can turn to now. Barrow is dead, found in the inn cellar, clutching a charred horseshoe. The woman in the cabin, gone. The building, burned down. The forest where it stood, flattened, like it had never existed. The rider is claiming me piece by piece. My voice cracks when I speak. My eyes see through fog even in daylight. When I walk, I feel hooves instead of heels. Last night, I dreamed of Elmsbrook again. Only this time, I wasn't outside the hall. I was riding up to it. The doors opened, and the people of the village came out to meet me, not with fear, but with reverence. They bowed. I dismounted, and I pointed at a young man standing in the shadows, a man who looked a lot like I did 5 years ago. I think I know what comes next. The curse isn't death, it's transformation. It takes the fearful and turns them into fear itself. That's how legends live. That's how the loop remembers. That's how the rider always returns. Now, when I close my eyes, I don't see darkness. I see a saddle. I see fog. I see a path winding endlessly through time. And I know, I'm no longer running from him. I am him. I no longer know where I end and he begins. I wake before dawn now, every morning, standing, never lying, in a room I don't remember entering. My boots are caked with dirt. My coat smells like smoke. Some nights, I go to bed in my apartment and open my eyes hours later beside an old church ruin or deep in a forest I've never seen. And the hoof prints are always there, waiting. The rider no longer follows me, because I am the one who follows others. This is the last page of my sanity, and I write it down for whoever finds this. If anyone ever does, maybe you'll read these words and dismiss them, call me a lunatic. Maybe you'll shiver, then laugh, then scroll away. But maybe, just maybe, you'll hear them too. The hooves, the whisper, the loop calling your name. It's been a month since I last saw my reflection. Mirrors crack now when I stand in front of them. Screens glitch. Cameras fail. It's as though the world is beginning to forget I ever existed. And yet, I have never been more present. People feel me now before I enter a room. Strangers cross themselves. Babies cry. Dogs bark wildly, eyes wide with something close to recognition. I am becoming him. Worse, I no longer fear it. Part of me wants it. That's the rot of the curse. That's how it spreads. The moment you accept the rider, he becomes you. And when the last piece of you lets go, when you finally ride willingly, the loop is complete. And it begins again, with someone else. I used to wonder where the rider came from. I thought it was a ghost, a cursed monk, a demon bound to a road. But now I understand. He's a memory, an old story so soaked in fear it grew flesh. Each generation gives him new form. Each witness feeds the legend. And when that legend is fed enough, it becomes real as you or me. And then it rides, seeking silence, seeking balance. I've ridden through towns that don't exist on any map, through streets that shimmer like candlelight and vanish when the sun rises. I've seen the faces of those I've marked, faces twisted in disbelief, terror, resignation. I don't speak to them, I only point. And when I do, I see myself in their eyes, my former self, the man who once laughed at legends. I wish I could warn them. I wish I could stop. But that part of me is gone. Tonight is the final ride. I can feel it. The mist is thicker. The wind whispers louder. And somewhere, out there, is the one I will pass this to. The one who's been hearing the hooves, waking at 3:03, finding ash in their shoes, and symbols carved into their doors. They don't know it yet, but they've already been chosen. All I have to do is find them, point, and disappear. That's how it works, you see. The rider never dies. He just changes names, and as soon as he does, the world forgets the one before him. So, if you're reading this, remember this final truth. If you've ever dreamed of foggy roads, if you've ever heard hoofbeats where there were none, if you've ever felt like something unseen is watching from just beyond the trees, run. Don't wait. Don't listen. Don't believe the lies you tell yourself to sleep at night. Because once you hear him, he hears you too. And once he rides for you, he never stops.